on the quarterbacks as they take the field to showcase their talent. Some choosing to throw, while others will wait until their pro days. Ty Simpson from Alabama is one of the quarterbacks who will throw at Indianapolis this week. He's viewed as a top 2 quarterback in this draft, and with a good showing this week could help his cause to go in the first round. While he is going to throw, Ty Simpson, Fernando Mendoza is not. The presumptive number 1 overall pick is going to instead throw at his pro day. That's April 1st. He'll be there in Indianapolis this week. It's not a far drive from Bloomington, Indiana, where he played his final college season. We have seen many top quarterbacks opt for this strategy that Mendoza is pursuing this year as well. And welcome into NFL Live. I am Field Yates with our crew here of Mina Kimes and Tim Hasselbeck and Matt Miller. A big week is upon us, everybody, as we have the Indianapolis Combine taking place this week. The entire NFL world is descending upon that great city. Let's start with Ty Simpson, and he is not going to throw, I should say, this week, Matt. A decision that is perhaps not surprising given that he did not finish on a strong note this past year. What do you make of his choice to throw in Indianapolis?
Yeah, Phil, this is the right decision by Ty Simpson. We have a quarterback who was a one-year starter at the University of Alabama, started just 15 games. And when I look at his tape, I see a player that a little bit undersized. He's listed at 6'2", 208 pounds. The first 9 games of the season last year, fantastic. The final 6 games, not as good. And I think this is going to be an opportunity for him to show teams who he is, show teams that he's healthy now after looking banged up over the second half of the season. Did suffer an injury, a cracked rib against Indiana as well. But for a lot of general managers, this will be their first or maybe second time seeing Ty Simpson in person because he was just a one-year starter at Alabama. So the on-field workout is an important opportunity for him to show teams who he is after not being able to compete at the Senior Bowl due to that rib injury. So I think this is the right decision and a huge opportunity for him, Tim, to put himself into that first-round conversation. We know Mendoza is going to go first. He's not pushing up there, but he puts himself in that conversation as a viable franchise quarterback.
Yeah, I agree with you, Matt. I mean, look, throwing at the combine, if it doesn't help you, doesn't make sense. It's why Mendoza's not throwing. It's why we've seen other quarterbacks in the past that kind of knew where they were going to end up, not throw at the combine. If it can help you, then go compete. And that's exactly where Ty Simpson is for everything that you just outlined. He's a one-year starter. They're going to want to get some legitimate measurements on him to make sure that everyone's comfortable with the size. And then if you're Simpson, you're also throwing, with other quarterbacks there that aren't necessarily guys that you've been throwing against or next to in years past. So it's an opportunity to look the best out of the group that's throwing there. So I think, kind of at every single turn, it makes sense for Ty Simpson to throw, show well. And I do think this is a scenario where the postseason and the draft process could actually help somebody. I think it will be favorable to Simpson. I think ultimately probably get him into the first round.
Yeah, Tim alluded to something that I actually find maybe more interesting or important with regards to Simpson than the throwing. I'm interested in the measurements. He's listed at 6'2". I'm interested in seeing if he is 6'2" at the combine because on tape he is a smaller quarterback, unlike Mendoza. But as far as throwing goes, totally in agreement. It benefits him to throw. I think my only concern from an evaluation standpoint is the biggest problems I saw, particularly as the season went along, were accuracy and decision-making under pressure. Obviously, that's not something you're going to see at the combine. So showing off the accuracy is important because that will be the case for him, I believe, to be drafted in the first round. But I would be cautious of reading too much into it in terms of some of the weaknesses we saw on the field because those will not be put to the test at the combine.
Lots of teams interested in a quarterback, obviously, this offseason. They include the likes beyond the Raiders of the Jets, the Cardinals, the Steelers, and the Dolphins, amongst others, that will also bubble up into that quarterback market. If Simpson does go in the first round, he'd be the 4th Alabama quarterback taken in the first round in the last 6 drafts. Quite a run for the Crimson Tide. New on NFL Live, we have some news coming from Atlanta today. This via Jeremy Fowler, who says the Falcons plan to franchise tag tight end Kyle Pitts, a source confirmed. This was the expectation league-wide. Now Atlanta locks it in. Mina, you like this decision by the Falcons to franchise tag Kyle Pitts?
I think it makes sense. Start with the cost of the tag, about $15 million. That's not a lot. I mean, that's like the 25th highest paid receiver for comparison's sake. So just from a position standpoint, tagging him as they, I imagine, try to work out a long-term deal, it does make sense. And I'll say this about Kyle Pitts. I feel like because he started out so strong in his career and then had some downs relative from a production standpoint, obviously red zone being most notable, it was almost slept on last year that he had the second most yards of any tight end in football behind McBride. You really saw when Drake London was out, his emergence as the number one option at times for Atlanta. He has unique field stretching ability for a tight end. I think he's improved also in pass protection. So I wouldn't be surprised if Atlanta does try to get a deal done. And it makes sense to me from a coaching perspective, too, with Kevin Stefanski coming in.
Yeah, completely agree. Look, in terms of just talent, I mean, and he still has the talent that, is why he was drafted where he was drafted. I mean, to your point, strong start and then kind of fell off the map and disappeared from a production standpoint, and then kind of had a better season a year ago. I think some of that was the quarterback play a year ago was slightly better than it had been during the dip in production. So I do think that when people look at Kyle Pitts and understand the unique ability in terms of his size and athleticism, catch radius, all of that stuff, that they're going to look at it and say, you know what, we could get more out of him, or we should be getting more out of him, which is exactly what Kevin Stefanski is going to be thinking about, the tight end. So, and then you reference the money. Look, it's exactly why, you go back and years ago, Jimmy Graham wanted to be, considered a wide receiver because he played detached rather than as an inline tight end. Look, Kyle Pitts is most dangerous when he's detached from the formation. So comparing him to high-paid wide receivers does make sense from the standpoint of it's pretty much a bargain at $15 million on a one-year deal.
Matt, let's spin this to the draft. As now there will be one less free agent tight end available. Who are some of the tight ends that you think are rising as we get through this process over the next couple of months?
Yeah, I think we have one first-round wide receiver, and that's Kenyon Sadiq from Oregon, who is he's an athletic freak. He's 6'3", 245 pounds. I won't be surprised if he is the best performer this week at the scouting combine. He should jump over 41 inches. Bench press is going to be through the roof. His agility shows up on tape, but it's that ability in the red area that really separated him. Now, there are some drop concerns. That's going to pop up as we talk about him more over the next 2 months, but he is the best tight end prospect in this class from a move tight end perspective. He gets great effort in the run game as a blocker as well. So he is one of those players that now could benefit with one less tight end available on the market.
And it is a super deep draft class at tight end, Matt. As you know, there's not many top-heavy players, but this year, day 3 is going to have some legit players at that position. Just getting started here on NFL. As the Cowboys agreed to a 3-year deal with soon-to-be free agent running back Javonte Williams, a 25-year-old set career highs in carries, rushing yards, and touchdowns in his first year with the Cowboys. That $24 million deal includes $16 million in guaranteed money. New on NFL Live with Javonte Williams agreed to, more eyes in Dallas turn to George Pickens and the potential franchise tag. Stephen Jones was asked about that in Indianapolis today.
Let's just take time. I mean, we want Pickens here. Think the world of him. Want him here, love him, and I think he wants to be here. So all that's a plus.
All right, so Tim, it sounds like a franchise tag is coming for George Pickens in Dallas. Is this a smart move, or does it risk complicating Pickens' future with the team? Because the Cowboys definitely have a history with franchise tag players.
Yeah. I think this one makes sense. I think you could go back in time, Field, and say, what they did with Dak Prescott didn't make sense. Obviously, the Parsons thing didn't work out. Ezekiel Elliott at times, things drug on with CeeDee Lamb. I think this one makes sense for Pickens. They've got a lot of money tied up in the CeeDee Lamb contract. Signing Pickens to a contract that he most likely would want to sign would eat up so much of the salary cap for Dallas that I do think 1 year, $28 million, say, hey, man, you've only done it for 1 year. We've only had you in Dallas 1 year. Let's go have a better year than you had this past year. And then you have an opportunity to hit free agency. Potentially you re-sign with Dallas, although that would be unlikely. And I think if he goes and has another career year, he probably could end up having a case to hit the open market and become the highest paid receiver in the game. So, I think as long as Pickens is okay with betting on himself, I do think that this is the right move for the team, and quite frankly, I think it'll be the better move for the player.
It was quite a coup last year for Dallas to acquire Pickens for the cost that it did. He recorded a career high in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns last season. Let's go to Baltimore, as Tyler Linderbaum likely won't be tagged by the Ravens, so the two sides could work out a deal for the 25-year-old center. They drafted Linderbaum with their first pick all the way back in 2022. Baltimore GM Eric DeCosta was asked about Linderbaum's future last week, saying the following, quote, "We got some work to do on Tyler Linderbaum's contract. He's a free agent. We strongly hope to have him back. He's a great player for us and a great leader. And then we got to I think, augment the guard position, which is something that we can do. We've got some good young guys that we really believe in this year that are going to make a big, big jump this year for us." That comes via the Inner Circle podcast, by the way. The Ravens, after Linderbaum, the Ravens' other top free agents include tight end Isaiah Likely, starting guard Daniel Falele, Pro Bowl fullback Patrick Ricard, and veterans DeAndre Hopkins and Kyle Van Noy. Baltimore also has a decision to make on Lamar Jackson, whose current salary cap number is $74.5 million. The decision, by the way, is do we renegotiate the deal or do we extend the deal? $74.5 million is a lot of money to have for just one player, Mina. But so many decisions for them to make this offseason. But let's start with Tyler Linderbaum. How important is it for Baltimore to find middle ground with their all-pro center?
This is tricky. Because on one hand, obviously, they should try to keep Tyler Linderbaum, right? He's not only one of the best run-blocking centers in the league, he's a perfect fit for what they want to do. What their new offensive coordinator coming from Chicago, Declan Doyle, wants to do, that outside zone run game. He is also a bit stronger as a run blocker than a pass protector, so he makes perfect sense for Baltimore, which is always going to be a bit of a run-heavy offense. The problem, of course, is that he is an actual free agent and that there's many other teams that will probably want to sign Tyler Linderbaum. Teams that also have a lot of money, including Field, we talked about this, the Raiders. Clint Kubiak runs a similar offense. They need a center. That would be a dream for a young quarterback. So while I imagine Baltimore will try to keep him, I do think it's possible that because of the market for him being so strong, he could be priced out for them.
Matt, when you look at this Ravens roster, which position do they need to prioritize, center included or excluded, in this draft?
Yeah, guys, I feel like I've been saying this every offseason for 5 years or more now. They need to get a big-bodied wide receiver for Lamar Jackson. They need someone that can win over the top, someone that can win the 50-50 balls. They have a great player in Zay Flowers, but he's undersized. That shows up at times. I want to expand the strike zone for Lamar Jackson by giving him someone that can win in these areas. Jordan Tyson from Arizona State would be a fantastic player for them in the middle of the first round if he happens to be there. There are some injury questions over the last 2 years for him. In 2024, there were some drop issues that seemed to be eliminated this year. He had a great season before missing some time with the injury. But Jordan Tyson, if he's there in the middle of round one, I think that's a no-brainer to give them the type of player that they've long needed, and they've tried to add veterans to be that player. Drafting one, getting cheaper when you're paying your quarterback $75 million a year, always a good way to do things. But this is how the Ravens used to build instead of trying to plug holes through free agency and trades. I think Jordan Tyson would be the ideal prospect for them here. And
just a reminder, the Ravens are scheduled to pick at number 14 overall. We now move to tragic news in the NFL over the weekend as wide receiver Rondale Moore died Saturday at the age of 25. Police in his hometown of New Albany, Indiana, told the Associated Press that Moore was found with a suspected self-inflicted gunshot wound. Moore missed last season for the Vikings because of a knee injury he suffered in the preseason. Vikings coach Kevin O'Connell said he was devastated by the news of Moore's death, adding, quote, "We are all heartbroken by the fact that he won't continue to live out his NFL dream." None too subtle reminder to check in on your people. You just never know what people are going through. Rondale Moore, gone far too. Well, speaking of touchdowns at the Super Bowl, who could forget Uchenna Nwosu's interception that he brought back 45 yards for a touchdown against the Patriots in Super Bowl 60. The score basically sealed the game and brought a second Lombardi trophy to Seattle. It's time now for us to get into our three-point stance. We are looking at off-season priorities for the NFC West today, starting with the Super Bowl champs in Seattle. Mina, what three things should the champs be focused on this offseason?
Yeah, let's start with cornerback Tariq Woolen, one of the finds that John Schneider has unearthed in later rounds of the draft as a free agent. I think Josh Jobe has been very good for them on the perimeter, but depending on what they decide to do with Woolen, that could be a need. Same thing applies to running back. Kenneth Walker III, the Super Bowl MVP, has a chance to be one of the higher paid running backs in free agency. Seattle opting not to tag him means they might be open to bringing in, I would say, more of a middle class or even a cheaper value option at the position and also potentially addressing it in the draft. Finally, and this to me is the most important need, interior offensive line. Gray Zabel, their first-round draft pick, looks like a hit for them at guard, but they also need, I believe, to consider upgrading at both center and then the other guard position. Obviously, didn't prohibit them from winning a Super Bowl, but I think it's something that would be very helpful, particularly running the football next year. So that's something I think Seattle could address. We talked about Tyler Linderbaum being the highest paid center. There's a lot of other options, interior offensive linemen, in free agency that I think they could have some appeal to Seattle, who, shockingly, does have a decent amount of money to work with this offseason.
A lot of cap space for Seattle in the 32nd pick in the draft. Let's go to San Francisco, Tim, and check in on the Niners. What are their top 3 priorities this offseason?
I'm going to start with adding some depth and some production on the defensive line. You know, get Bosa some help because, quite frankly, they just hadn't done a very good job of generating pressure, a year ago. And so I do think that addressing the D-line, because I think that's how they want to play defense with guys up front that can be disruptive. I'd start there. The other thing is I think you need to have an eye on the future. Trent Williams is 37 years old, and while he's still playing at a ridiculously high level, you never know when guys are going to step away. The Niners have not drafted an offensive lineman over the last 4 years before round 3, but for one time. And so I do think you have to be, just have an eye ahead with the guys up front. And then lastly, and I think importantly, you need to recover from the Brandon Ayuk mess. They invested a lot of money into Ayuk. It did not work out. In the production in the passing game, really outside of Jennings, it wasn't very good. Jennings is heading to free agency, and so I do think getting, receivers that can win, that you can count on around Brock Purdy, so that the passing game isn't about Christian McCaffrey and option routes. I think that needs to be a massive priority for the 49ers this offseason.
Let's go to Arizona, Matt. I wish we could have some of their weather right now. They have the 3rd pick in the upcoming draft. What are their 3 priorities for this offseason?
Yeah, Phil, we have to look at the edge rusher position for the Cardinals as one that has to be addressed. Darius Robinson was drafted in the 1st round 2 years ago. He has just 2 sacks in his career. Josh Sweat has been a solid player on the other side, but this needs to be something the Cardinals can home grow. They have not had that legitimate threat. They drafted Walter Nolan in the 1st round last year to be an interior player. He looked promising in a limited time, but the edge has to get help. On the other side of the ball, right tackle also needs some help. And this could be an area, along with edge rusher, that would get considered at number 3 overall. It's a deep offensive tackle class in the draft. Someone like Francis Mauigoa from Miami could be in play for them there at that right tackle spot opposite Paris Johnson Jr. But general manager Monty Ossenfort has to get a hit in this year's draft at number 3 overall. And finally, the big question mark for Arizona, what are they going to do with Kyler Murray, a player who was benched last year, does carry a massive dead cap number if he were to be moved. But it seems like the tide has turned there. A new coaching staff coming in. They will most likely want to identify their own player at quarterback, their own franchise guy. Kyler has not lived up to that number 1 overall pick status. He's a player that seems to keep them right in that quarterback purgatory mark. He's usually a top 15 to 20 quarterback, never a top 10 player. So the biggest question mark for them is, who is the quarterback next year and what do they do with Kyler Murray?
Let's go to our last team, the Rams, and we use a teamwork approach as each one of us would give a top priority. Mina, where would you start?
Cornerback. This is the position you're going to hear consistently mocked to the Rams because it was their biggest weakness last year, pass defense. That was really apparent down the stretch and ultimately a big part of why, frankly, they weren't in the Super Bowl. Now, I think with multiple first-round draft picks, thanks to the Falcons, they have the potential to both address it in the draft early on and then also in free agency. This is a team that's very much in win-now mode, which could be appealing to some of the veteran free agents available, like a Jamel Dean or Jalen Watson or Tariq Woolen, if you wanted to go a little bit younger. But it's something I expect the Rams to address pretty aggressively, potentially both in the draft and in free agency.
Yeah, I completely agree with Mina there. The other thing you have to realize is Matthew Stafford had a career year because he was healthy for the season. You think at the start of the season he was not healthy. The reason for their success was he had a career year that in his late 30s. That doesn't typically happen. And so I think investing in the offensive line, they are not littered with a bunch of high picks on that offensive line. I do think that, making sure that you're investing there because guys get injured. And so all of a sudden you're playing with a hole at guard or a hole at tackle. Now all of a sudden your MVP quarterback gets injured. The season's down the tube. So I do think that, making sure that you're just replenishing up front is important to protect their most valuable asset.
Yeah, not only protecting him, but starting to think about life after him because he is in his upper 30s. He did just announce recently that he's coming back for another season after winning the MVP. But life after Stafford is something that this team does have to start thinking about it. And I feel like we've been saying this for a couple of years now to where eventually maybe it happens. This could be the year because they have 2 picks in the first round after that trade with Atlanta last year. They had pick number 13. And they come back on the clock at pick 29. And this could be a landing spot for a player we talked about earlier in the show, Ty Simpson, the quarterback from Alabama. But this is also a draft that is rich in that round 4 to 5 quarterback range. Guys like Carson Beck from Miami, Drew Allard from Penn State, Cade Klubnik from Clemson. There are solid options at the top of day 3 in terms of players you can bring in, see how they work in Sean McVay's system, and maybe then determine if they could be the player that is the quarterback for the Rams after Stafford retires.
Well, let's keep things moving here on the Rams front as we have news on the Los Angeles Rams. This is new on NFL Live, and it's courtesy of Shefty. Who else? We've known for a couple of weeks that Cliff Kingsbury was going to be joining the Rams staff. His role has been determined. He is the new Rams assistant head coach. And just based off of history, if you become an offensive coaching staff member under Sean McVay, you'll probably become an NFL coach again in the next couple of seasons. That seems to be how it works. By the way, Robert Woods also added to that coaching staff. Retired a couple weeks ago from being a player. He's now their assistant wide receivers coach. That's pretty cool right there for the LA native. Quarterbacks, risers, and potential surprises. Matt, you'll be in Indy tomorrow. Take us through your top storylines entering the week.
Yeah, Phil, the big one is which edge rusher is going to stand out and maybe emerge from a very good pack of the players. David Bailey from Texas Tech, Reuben Bain Jr. from Miami, and Arvell Reese, the hybrid linebacker from Ohio State. We've heard that we're going to see some testing from a lot of the top prospects. These 3 we haven't heard a firm yes or no on, but I'm hopeful, whether it be through measurements, medicals, interviews, or on-field workouts, we see one of these players emerge as the true top edge in this class. Right now, I have all 3 ranked in my top 10 players overall. So a really good class of edge players to watch. Secondarily, a deep safety class is something that we'll be watching. Caleb Downs from Ohio State is a top 10 prospect in this class, but he's not the only one. Dylan Thieneman from Oregon and Emmanuel McNeil-Warren from Toledo both also rank as first-round players. So watching these guys work out, the safety class should shine if we get these players on the field for those workouts. Agility times, explosive numbers, the vertical jump are expected from Caleb Downs if he gets out there. And then finally, wide receiver. Who's going to shine at the wide receiver position? I have 6 wide receivers. My most recent first-round mock draft, 7 of them could go in the top 50 overall. It is a loaded group. Will it be Mekhi Lemon from USC, Jordan Tyson from Arizona State, or Carnell Tate from Ohio State? Among this group of really talented wide receivers, it is the deepest position group in this year's draft class, guys. So I'm excited to see these players move, run the gauntlet drill. We want to see their hands in person. But the wide receivers should steal the show when it comes to offensive playmakers testing this week.
Matt, I've got 42 draftable wide receivers in my database right now. So a loaded class, to say the least. Let's go to the veteran wide receivers, though, as George Pickens headlines the list of potential free agent wideouts. Dallas, as we told you earlier on in the show, likely to use the franchise tag on him. Other notables include Indianapolis's Alec Pierce, San Francisco's Shawan Jennings, and future Hall of Famer Mike Evans. Keep in mind, by the way, Tyreek Hill was released by the Dolphins last week. The 32-year-old is coming off of a major knee injury. He could sign as soon as right now. That has not yet happened. But, Mina, looking at this free agent list, if you're a competitor or a playoff team from last year in need of a wide receiver, are you looking at a late first-round guy from some of the names that Matt mentioned, or are you targeting one of these free agents?
It really depends, not to cop out here, on what you need. I think there's a little bit of a disconnect between the draft and free agency. The draft, to my eye, has a lot of X receivers, a lot of bigger guys who can win on the perimeter, red zone threats. Denzel Boston out of Washington is a player I love in terms of the second half of the first round for a team like Baltimore that desperately needs red zone size, someone who's reliable catching the football. He only had 2 drops last season. Whereas I think with the receivers in free agency, there's more value with like wide receiver 2, 3, smaller guys who can play inside, outside. So I'd say it's team by team, and also depends on, of course, where you're picking in the draft.
Yeah, listen, the bust rate at wide receiver is high, and so when there are guys that have proven that they can play in the league, I think for teams that are contending teams and need to get it right, I think going the veteran route makes sense. And I think if you look at this class, look, I don't have to go much further than Mike Evans and Alec Pierce in terms of guys that prove they can play. Talk about big guys that can, catch touchdowns or stretch the field. I think that ends up being really attractive. Then you got guys like Jawan Jennings that are in the group as well. I would just say this for a guy like Mike Evans. You just look at Devontae Adams and, his path, and then he gets linked up with Matthew Stafford. Well, he led the league in touchdown receptions because he was dominant inside the 20-yard line because he was paired with the right quarterback. That's what I think makes Mike Evans extremely attractive. If you're Buffalo, maybe even Kansas City, I do think that there's an element of these veteran guys that have proven it, that can catch touchdowns, that are much more of a sure thing if you need them to be.
Tim, Evans will be fascinating. Perhaps he goes for the shorter-term deal. I think that Alec Pierce is going to be that free agent who signs in the initial portion of free agency. The people are just shocked to see the number. And I'm not I think we could be talking about a $25 million per year wide receiver. Hasn't even reached the peak of his career. And by the way, has led the NFL in yards per catch over each of the last 2 seasons. He is about to be extremely rich. Back into our 3-point stance. This time, let's take a look at the offseason priorities for the AFC West, starting with the AFC West champion Broncos. Tim, what should Denver's 3 priorities be this offseason?
I think I would start off by looking at the linebacker position and getting a little bit younger there. Obviously, Alex Singleton, getting up there in age. I believe Drake Greenlaw might be the only guy they have under contract at the moment. So I would get younger at linebacker. I would also invest in the tight end position, putting players around Bo Nix. I think the guys that they have at tight end have kind of been, one-dimensional with the things that they are kind of good at doing. And so I think, investing in tight end with somebody a little more well-rounded will help them and do some of the things that Sean Payton likes to do. Then I would add another running back. And look, that can be, re-signing J.K. Dobbins. But I think that, when you look at them offensively, R.J. Harvey was really, really good. He was dynamic. He was good in the run game and the passing game, primarily the passing game. I think having a bigger, more physical back, does the things that Sean Payton likes to do on offense. You think about all the success in New Orleans, like a lot of times it was Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. Like it was things like that. I think Harvey has his role. I think in getting a bigger, more physical back, because that is how they're going to continue to build the offense around Bo Nix.
Mina, let's go to Los Angeles. What are the top 3 priorities for the Chargers heading in the offseason?
Yeah, won't surprise anyone. I'm starting with the offensive line. And let's begin with the center position. Bradley Bozeman's going to be in the last year of his deal. Felt like too often Justin Herbert was facing pressure through the A-gaps. So that's a position I would look to address. And I would also look to address guard. I think the Chargers are most likely to move on from Mekhi Becton. This is a position that's been an issue with them for a minute. Zion Johnson's also a free agent. And if I were them, I'd honestly look for offensive linemen with versatility, right? Because the dream would be to have players at both these positions who have some ability to move around given all the injuries they've experienced on the offensive line. Finally, pass rush. Edge specifically, got a couple of free agents. Odafe Oweh, who was excellent for them after trading for him, and then Khalil Mack, who even as he gets older, still very effective as a pass rusher. So I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to keep one of those players. They do have a decent amount of cap space. Tuli Tuipulotu looks like an ascending player, but that needs to be addressed because he cannot be the only edge rusher on their roster going into the next season.
Matt, the Raiders are on the clock with the first overall pick, but they have a lot of work to do this offseason. What should be their priorities?
Yeah, Phil, before they come on the clock with that number 1 overall pick, we'll see free agency, and I think this is where they have to add at the wide receiver position. Trey Tucker, Jack Beck, they need a true number 1. Well, you guys highlighted earlier how deep this wide receiver class is of free agency. The Raiders should spin to get a veteran here because they are going to have a rookie quarterback. Having that veteran presence, a wide receiver, a true number 1 is going to open things up for Brock Bowers. It's going to open things up for Ashton Genty. So that is a huge key for the Raiders. Second, we have to figure out what's going on with Maxx Crosby. Is it a stay or go situation? If you're moving Maxx Crosby for draft capital, you're starting over at defensive end, you have to get the draft picks to go get an edge in this class, which again is very deep, even in round 1. So if Crosby's moved, you can draft a replacement, albeit not someone who's going to be as productive as him in year 1. If Crosby's staying, I think the moves around him to keep him happy, to show him this is a franchise that is trying to win football games, is huge. And to do that, I think you make the easy pick at number 1 overall. Don't even answer the phone when people try calling to trade up. You draft Fernando Mendoza. You take the quarterback from Indiana, who's coming off an undefeated Heisman Trophy national championship winning season, who was fantastic with 41 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, who added scores on the ground. He plays with toughness, with poise. The Raiders have tried many different ways to acquire a franchise quarterback since Derek Carr left, and even before that, Mendoza has the tools, he has the goods to be that quarterback that Las Vegas needs.
Let's go to the Chiefs now, who had a disappointing season last year after they missed the playoffs for the first time in almost a decade. They'll have a lot of questions to answer this offseason, including the future of their all-pro tight end Travis Kelce. Andy Reid, their head coach, recently addressed the prospects of Travis returning.
There is communication, though. That's the main thing, Sam. And so I always go, I've said this before to you, just as long as there's communication, I'm good. That means people want to move forward. And I think that's where Trav is. I'm not trying to put words in his mouth at all. And I try to give him some space here. He's been doing this a long time and he can sort all that out as he goes forward. But we're proceeding with that and there is communication going on.
All right, so we'll see there on Travis Kelce, Tim. But what is their biggest need this offseason in Kansas City?
First off, I just love Andy's approach. Like it's so refreshing. It's why players like him. It's just a good way to go about it. And it's why guys maybe even play a little bit longer. Look, I think they do need help, though. And look, Travis is getting older. They have not been very good at wide receiver. Quite frankly, they've been looking for one. I think running back's a massive need for the Chiefs. They've have had spurts where they've had production at the position, but you need to be able to run the football. And if people are going to essentially do everything they can to kind of limit certain things in the passing game, we got to make them pay and be able to run the football. That's not something that they've been able to do, especially this past season. Patrick Mahomes now coming off of a significant injury. People can talk about a tight end being a quarterback's best friend. It's a running game, man. It absolutely is the fear that people have to commit to stopping the run. And so when I look at that, find a back that can get it done. So whether it's free agency or the draft, it doesn't matter to me. But the Patrick Mahomes, it's a dependent position. He needs help and he needs a running back.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a position they've underestimated or invested in, pardon me, for the last 2 years. Something definitely needs to be addressed. But I'm going to hit wide receiver. I mean, Tim brought it up, and especially looking at where they're picking in the draft at 9, which is, unusually high for Kansas City. There's a potential there, I think, to get a real blue chip receiver. And when you look at this group, I mean, Rashee Rice coming off of a down year, potential suspension looming. You've got free agents leaving also as well. Juju and Tyquan Thornton are both free agents. Xavier Worthy is a good role player, but he's not a number 1. If a player like Jordan Tyson were available to them at 9, to me, he would give them something particularly that I feel like it's been missing in that intermediate passing game. And then he has, as Matt knows, the ability to turn 10 yards into 20, just because of his explosiveness and how quickly he can change speed. So it would be hard for me to not take him if he was there. And I do think it fits a need for Kansas City.
Yeah, I think we all agree offense needs some help, but what about the defense? That's something that dropped off last year from the Super Bowl runs that they had, and especially getting that front four pressure. Chris Jones is it. George Karlaftis got a big contract. He's a solid player, but he's a role player. They need someone that strikes fear in opposing quarterbacks. This year, we know how great this edge group is. Reuben Bain Jr., Arvell Reese is probably going to be way off the board. David Bailey maybe will be available there. If one of the top 3 edge rushers is available, for me, that's the pick. And then you hit the wide receiver position, maybe in round 2 with someone like Omar Cooper Jr. from Indiana, who would be a seamless replacement should they lose any time from Rashee Rice next year.
I keep thinking to myself personally, though, that the floor for Jeremiah Love in this year's draft is number 9 to Kansas City, a player who may well be gone by the time we get there. But if he is there, would be awfully tempting for Brett Veach as they try to get this offense back on track. As we get ready to sign off for the day here, we have had quite the day weather-wise in Connecticut and really the entire Eastern time zone. So first of all, big shout out to the entire production staff for making this all happen here. And everybody that has also been out shoveling the driveway today, shout out to you. Your reward for this hard work is to take a look back at some of the best snow moments in NFL history. NFL Live is back at it again tomorrow. In the meantime, please, Mother Nature, please.
I'm so happy and grateful that the Lord has blessed me to play in some